Hello everyone, Dr. Polaris here. Given the range of extinct animals I've covered on this channel, the primates have been one group I've only mentioned a couple of times. That ends today, with it being the goal of this video to cover the origins and early evolution of the clade during the early Cenozoic. Primates are a very distinctive lineage of mammals, with modern forms belonging to two major groups, with these being the so-called wet-nosed strepsirrhines, which include the Malagasy lemurs and the lorosoids, native to mainland Africa and tropical Asia, with their sister lineage being the so-called dry-nosed haplorhines, consisting of the tarsiers, monkeys and apes. All of these animals are united by a set of anatomical traits, many of which are related to arboreal habits, including elongated fingers that terminate in flattened nails rather than claws, bunodont molar teeth, well suited for crushing and grinding fruit, as well as strong colour vision, which is somewhat unusual for placental mammals. Indeed, the eyes of all modern primates are forward-facing and are rather close set, giving a good sense of depth perception, with their sockets being fully enclosed by a post-orbital bar. Most living forms are native to tropical forested ecosystems, although there are exceptions to this of course, most notably Homo sapiens, but also the famous Japanese macaques, and the snub-nosed monkeys that dwell in the mountains of southern China. Primates are members of the clade Euarchonta, which represents one of the four major groups of placental mammals, with the others being Laurasiatheria, Afrotheria and Xenarthra. Euarchonta and Laurasiatheria are sister groups, representing the placental mammals that evolved on the northern continents of Eurasia and North America, while Afrotherians and Xenarthrans developed on the southern landmasses of Africa and South America. It is currently uncertain as to when all of these groups first evolved, with fossil evidence indicating a very early Cenozoic origin for placentals as a whole, while genetic testing has indicated a late Cretaceous point of divergence. This is another one of those classic paleontological controversies, the so-called rocks versus clocks debate. Other groups of animals that diversified rapidly at the beginning of the Cenozoic after the KPG extinction event, such as neornithine birds, also typify this problem. Euarchonta has been established based mostly on molecular evidence and share few anatomical traits. Members of the clade include the Gliriforms, which contains the rodents and lagomorphs, with their sister lineage being the Euarchontans, including the tree shrews of Scandentia, the Dermopteran Colugos, and the primates. Scandentians are small, slender animals with long tails and soft greyish to reddish-brown fur, making them look a bit like squirrels but with pointier snouts. Despite often being referred to as tree shrews, not all species live in trees, and none of them are shrews, with some spending much of their time on the ground. Most are omnivores, feeding on a mixture of invertebrates, fruit, small vertebrates and nectar. They are native to the warm tropical and subtropical forests of South and Southeast Asia, although due to a very poor fossil record, it is difficult to ascertain where and when this group first evolved. However, given that Gliriforms also seem to have diversified in Asia first before spreading elsewhere, I would put money on Euarchonta having an Asian origin. Although often considered to be basal relatives of primates, some studies have found Scandentians to be the sister group to rodents and lagomorphs instead, demonstrating that the common ancestor of all Euarchonta probably looked a lot like modern tree shrews. Meanwhile, the Colugos of the order Dermoptera are often placed as closer relatives of primates. These bizarre animals are endemic to Southeast Asia and somewhat resemble large gliding tree shrews, possessing a gliding membrane or patagium that runs from the shoulder blades to the front paws, from the tip of the rearmost fingers to the tip of the toes, and from the hind legs to the tip of the tail. With their comb-like teeth, nocturnal habits and largely herbivorous diets, Colugos share some aspects of their biology with lemurs, although these traits developed independently. Like Scandentians, Colugos have a very minor presence in the fossil record, with the earliest known Dermopterans appearing during the late Eocene, already in Southeast Asia. The first potential relatives of the primates, however, may have originated in North America instead. These were the Plesiadapiforms, a possibly unnatural clade of proto-primates. Appearing during the early Paleocene, these were an incredibly diverse group, including more than 140 named species, arranged into 11 different potential families. Over the course of its more than 25 million year history, the group underwent an impressive adaptive radiation, producing forms with very distinctive dental adaptations, including weird multi-cusped upper incisors and a diversity of very specialised lower premolars. Plesiadapiforms share some traits with living primates, including long fingers well suited for grasping, and other features of the skeleton that are related to arboreality. Dentally, Plesiadapiforms look quite similar to definitive primates, with broad talonid basins and a similar pattern of cusps and crests on the molars. However, no known Plesiadapiform exhibits the characteristic features of living primates associated with specialised vision, such as the postorbital bar or close-set orbits. Even though they exhibit some features for primate-like grasping, known Plesiadapiforms still retain claws on most of their digits, similar to those of arboreal rodents. These contrasts have led some paleontologists to suggest that Plesiadapiforms do not belong in the order Primates, and should be placed just outside it. The oldest potential member of this group was the controversial genus Purgatorius. Known from the earliest Paleocene of Montana in the United States, this was a tiny arboreal animal that would have very much resembled a modern tree shrew, measuring about 15 to 20 centimetres or 6 to 8 inches long. It is represented almost entirely by fossilised teeth, although we do know that it possessed flexible ankles, indicating good climbing ability. Its generalised teeth suggest an omnivorous diet consisting of insects, fruit and seeds, with there being 7 named species, which varied slightly in terms of specialisation. Although some studies have suggested that Purgatorius was a non-placental eutherian, the majority of recent analyses, published in the late 2010s and 2020s, have consistently found the genus to be either a basal relative of primates within Plesiadapiforms, or as the sister taxon to Colugos. Whatever the case, this genus does seem to be some kind of primatamorph, with the earliest fossil remains dating to just over 100,000 years after the KPG extinction event. Given that 2 species are known from this time period, it has been argued that Purgatorius as a genus originated during the Maastrichtian. Given that a putative relative of primates originated this early in the Cenozoic, then this would mean that all of the other 4 major placental clades discussed earlier also evolved during the late Cretaceous. Regardless of this, the Plesiadapiforms diversified rapidly following the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, producing a diverse array of different species which lived up in the canopy. Some early forms, such as Torrejonia, which was native to New Mexico circa 62 to 58 million years ago, would have strongly resembled tree shrews, being agile arboreal generalists that weighed roughly 741 grams. Other groups, particularly the Micromomyides, were even smaller, being comparable to the modern mouse lemurs of Madagascar in terms of size, weighing up to 40 grams or 1.5 ounces. Native to both North America and China during the late Paleocene and early Eocene, these little animals were probably mostly insectivorous, with the relatively complete genus Dromomymus revealing a tiny mammal with a skull the size of a grape, which would have resembled the modern pen-tailed tree shrew in life. A family of larger animals that may also have been Plesiadapiforms, or at least primatamorphs, were the Mixodectids. Recent studies of the genus Mixodectids from western North America circa 62 million years ago have revealed a relatively large 1.3 kilogram climbing mammal with an omnivorous diet consisting mostly of leaves. Like many putative Plesiadapiforms, it possessed large forward-pointing incisors, superficially similar to those of rodents, although those of the primatamorphs were not ever growing. Along with their clawed feet, this would have made these mammals somewhat resemble hybrids of modern lemurs and squirrels, with some species known to have possessed long bushy tails. Around the time of the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, Plesiadapiforms had spread all across the northern hemisphere, with the balmy conditions of the time allowing these animals to move into the high Arctic, with early Eocene-aged fossil remains having been found on Ellesmere Island, which would have had a warm subtropical climate similar to modern Louisiana. The very successful genus Ignatius was present here, living much like a squirrel in the cypress swamp forests of the Eocene Arctic Circle. It was highly specialised for vertical climbing and clinging on tree trunks, as well as for more agile arboreality than seen in other Plesiadapiforms. Its flexible lumbar vertebrae would have enabled Ignatius to bound between branches while looking for food or escaping from predators. The large forward-pointing incisors and reduced shearing crests of this animal indicate a diet specialised for feeding on fruit, seeds, flowers, and exudates such as sap and tree gum. Despite living in such a warm ecosystem, Ignatius would have had to deal with months of winter darkness. It was among the longest-lived Plesiadapiforms, first appearing during the mid-Paleocene roughly 62 million years ago, and persisted until the late Eocene circa 33 million years ago. Other groups, such as the Carpolestidae, were not as long-lived, thriving around the time of the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, but declining after this. These were small animals, weighing between 20 and 150 grams, with the type genus Carpolestidae possessing large eyes, flattened fingernails on its hind feet, but claws on its fingers, in addition to divergent big toes useful for gripping branches. Other Plesiadapiforms showed adaptation similar to the oddest living primates, with the genus Chiromyoides from the late Paleocene of France and the United States, probably living much like the Malagasy ii, utilising its large robust incisors to chisel into tree bark in order to search for wood-boring insects. Other very successful genera, such as Plesiadapis itself, produced up to 15 species and were among the largest members of the clade, reaching 2.1 kilograms or 4.6 pounds, being about the size of a modern capuchin monkey. Its skull was relatively elongated and possessed a tooth structure similar to that of rodents or the Australian diprotodont marsupials, with enlarged gnawing incisors, tiny heavily reduced canines, and molars adapted for crushing and grinding plant matter. Taking advantage of the boom in angiosperm diversity after the KPG extinction event, Plesiadapiforms pioneered the type of ecological niches later taken by more familiar modern primates. It is still unclear how these animals are related to living forms. They may be a sister group, or it may be possible that strepsirrhines and haplorhines evolved from within Plesiadapiforms. This is not helped by the poor fossil record of very early crown group primates, which are thought to have emerged by around 60 million years ago. However, as the Eocene progressed, Plesiadapiforms appear to have declined in overall diversity, perhaps due to increased competition from their primate cousins, as well as arboreal rodents, although it's certainly likely that climatic changes played a role as well. Although some genera such as Ignatius survived into the late Eocene, the group died out during the extinction event at the end of the period, with their preferred tropical and subtropical forested habitats being pushed further south as the Earth entered into the icehouse climate conditions of the Oligocene. Thanks for watching, everyone. The next episode will be covering the early evolution of the canines, including the fox line and dog line groups, but not the South American pseudo-cyanines, as I've covered them before. If you want to suggest ideas for future episodes, as well as offering me some kind of financial support, then consider heading over to my Patreon page. See you again soon. Cheerio.